The National Office of Statistics, which published the data on Monday, links causes of inflation to high costs of food, transportation, and electricity tariff.
Inflation actually makes nonsense of what you have in your pocket. It also makes nonsense of your investments. That's the thing. You'll find out now that rent, money in the stock market, everything has lost automatic value. It's as good as you are devaluing the naira, except you want to deceive ourselves.
The government agency reveals that inflation kicked up straight in 3 months, reaching the peak since 2010. Food prices, including beverages and grains, were rated with the highest price point, followed by high cost of transportation. On a monthly basis, inflation rate went up by 1.61%. Other components in the data included housing, water, electricity, and gas.
The indices that form the basis of the release were done before the increase in fuel price. So you can now imagine by the time we factor in what is going to happen after the increase of the fuel price. I can see inflation going close to 50% at the next peak.
Many people believe that the recent increase in fuel price will worsen the living condition of the Nigerians. Effiong Ekop, TVC News, Lagos.
Okay, joining us this morning is an economist, Ayo Teriba. Good to have you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this inflation that is now on the high side of double digits, 15.6%, that report says it's not likely to end anytime soon. But is this just a case of too much money chasing too few goods, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, it's not complicated at all. It's not about too much money chasing too few goods. As you know, there isn't the money. The cash is very scarce in circulation. It's more the case of the cost shocks. You've had key costs spiking. For example, the price of fuel. We've just, liberalized the pump prices of petroleum products. You also have the exchange rate. You remember the prime market rate, moving, well above 300, naira per US dollar. So these two key shocks, and then we've also raised the tariff, electricity tariff. So key costs have spiked, and that's being reflected in consumer prices. And that's one reason, as worrying as it might be, that new peaks have been reached. The current peak is close to the one attained in 2010. So we've not had it this bad since 2010. But the comfort is that cost shocks don't persist. Cost shocks give one-off jump in inflation and will die off, unlike demand shock that you were referring to. If it's too much money chasing too few goods, that persists. But when it's cost shocks, it's happened this month, we've taken the shock. Next month will be better.
If you look at the progression from February, it's been climbing, really. It's been climbing.
In actual fact, it has not been climbing.
Okay.
If you look at the month-on-month development, there was a spike in February because those cost shocks were intense that month. In March, the month-on-month rate dropped. In April, the month-on-month rate dropped further. It took the fresh shocks that happened in May for you to see this other spike. If you are looking at the month-on-month.
Month-on-month. But year-on-year?
Year-on-year, because you are referencing a very dull period, the election period, February to May. This year will look exaggerated, but if you look at the month-on-month, inflation story has been, very bad in February, improved in March and April, and it's bad again in May. And you would expect that over the next couple of months, with the policy being put in place by the central bank, the exchange shock, shouldn't repeat. The pump price has been adjusted. The electricity tariff has been adjusted. So we've taken the shocks in the past.
All right. So forward, what you're saying then is there is no cause for alarm right now. So we shouldn't worry about anything. Now, imported food, continues to go up. The percentage, 18.6%, in spite of moves to actually, well, promote Made in Nigeria, the import substitution policies and all of that?
Well, it's the,
what's responsible for that?
It's the price of imported food that is going on.
Yes.
Rather than the quantity.
No, the price.
Yeah, the
Perhaps
price.
we should
Through
trace
the
to the
exchange
parallel
rate.
markets.
Through the exchange
When
rate.
you have the parallel market. Okay, so let's bring
why
in
it's
an economist now from Abuja. Mr. Audu, what is the cause of the hike in inflation that we have today? It's 15.6%. What is responsible for that?
First of all, there was an increase in fuel prices, which is petrol prices, pump prices, and that has led to, you know, the inflation, because people spending more on fuel will now have to translate the cost into goods and services. Now, there's also the issue of the weak naira after oil prices, after the weak naira as a result of decline in foreign reserves. You know, imported goods have become very expensive because as a result of the fall in the value of the naira. So basically, these are the things that is actually causing inflation right now. The increase in fuel prices and the decrease in value of the naira. Let's also not forget the Niger Delta attacks that has led to lower oil production. All these factors are contributing to the inflation in the economy. Thank you very much.
Okay, so still remaining with you, Aliyu Audu, there in Abuja. So what will it take what's the way out, really, you know, for this situation not to spiral completely out of control, which is what some economists are already expressing?
Okay, well, it's actually a very difficult one. First of all, now, unfortunately, one of the ways of curbing inflation is for the central bank to reduce the amount of money in the economy. That means they are going to use various monetary policies to ask banks to put most of their money in central bank. That is the effect of trying to curb inflation. And when you're trying to curb inflation, it's also going to reduce employment, because you're taking money out of the economy so that people don't have much money, and as such cannot, the tendencies of inflation can be reduced. So if the solution to it is not very good for Nigeria right now, so I will assume it's something that we should just be patient, wait and see how things develop. But I believe in coming months, once you start having the recent foreign exchange flexible policies,
yes,
it is assumed that the naira is going to drop. Once that drops, I think that will go a long way to reducing inflation.
Okay,
and also, if government is able to try to increase the minimum wage, I think all this will have an effect, maybe not necessarily on inflation, but will have an effect on curbing recession and the difficult economy we have right now.
All right, Mr. Ayo, we're back to your postulation. Actually, what he said would just probably just re-echoed what you said initially. But let's quickly look at some effects of inflation before the solution. Yes, but what effects are, apart from the fact that you can now buy your rice at maybe 16,000 or 15,000, then 1,000 naira more than what you used to buy it. What other effect will this have on the Nigerian economy and, of course, the Nigerian masses?
Yeah, I'll be very careful not to exaggerate the place of inflation in the economy, because at this time we are seeing the first quarter growth of the economy was negative, minus 0.4%.
Even beyond the IMF projection?
Well, the IMF projected not for quarter one, they projected for the full year. And we've only seen
just
the first quarter. Okay. But that's enough bad news that the economy didn't grow at all. Rather, it declined slightly. So when you are confronted with an economy that is declining and inflation, you are better off fixing that economic decline first. You cannot begin to, elevate inflation above. Okay. This is actually people's livelihoods. This is people's income. This is, the country's growth. So you need to battle real growth first before you consider inflation. So you cannot start talking about using monetary policy to fight inflation at this moment. Rather, you will ignore that and use monetary policy to support recovery. Because if you get a decline in GDP for the second quarter in a row, then you have a recession. So you can't leave recession and begin to worry.
Which we've been told there's a risk of that
already. An economy in recession is unlikely to sustain inflation. You are in a country where most workers, state government workers across the country can't even get, salaries for 3 months. So where is the too much money
excess liquidity
that it says, so it's not a monetary tightening issue. It's a cost shock. It will die off on its own self, and Nigeria had better concentrate right now on trying to
Would you want to re-echo then what the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, has said, that we really should not be too fixated with the forex rate and all of that, but we really should be focusing our attention on, growing the economy and improving the cost of living? Is that what will do the magic?
With the announcement by the central bank last week, people tend to focus on what's going to happen to the official rate that is going to become flexible. But people don't discuss the beneficial effect on the parallel market rate that had all along been determined by market forces. It's climbed above 300.
About 370.
If you watch, you said 370, but by weekend it has dropped below 320. So allowing flexibility in the official market is strengthening, is helping the autonomous rate to firm up, and that's a positive benefit. I mean, this shock that we were talking about, exchange rate shock, was not shock in the official rate, it was shock in the parallel market. And that's been corrected. So we've taken the shock, improvements will follow.
But do you think the improvement in the stock to about 700 billion as soon as the CBN came up with this latest policy, is it a good sign? Is it sustainable?
Of course, it's a good sign.
But sustainability is the real issue here.
I think it will be sustained in that the market participants had long been asking for a more transparent exchange rate regime, a more flexible exchange rate regime. It has discouraged some people who had a forex to supply from bringing the forex to the market because they don't want to be forced. They don't want to be forced to surrender the forex at 200. When if they need to buy, they'll have to maybe buy at a much. So I think it's a positive move from all indications. It's a positive move for the economy, and we should concentrate though on rebuilding the weakening economy rather than the distraction of
talking about growth and rebuilding the economy. And what you said, that it's not about monetary issue, but is there any sense in, you're aware that there's been a lot of contraction when it comes to economic output and all that, the manufacturers are not faring well as we are. Most of them do have,
because of the restricted access to foreign exchange.
Okay, all right. So, apart from the foreign exchange, do you think if the lending rate were to be reduced, would that help in any way?
Yes. Right now, I think that the stance of monetary policy is too tight. The monetary policy rate for an economy that is more or less in recession, you need even the monetary policy rate to go down. The cash that's been, sterilized in cash reserve requirements needs to go down. So therefore, lending rates, bank rates, if they go down, they would help the economy.
Okay, so it's a bit. I was just trying to go back to what you said about the monetary policy not really affecting the inflation rate, as it were. Perhaps a bit of it has something to do with the inflation rate.
A bit of it. What brought the inflation is clear. We had severe cost shocks. Those are not going to happen, every month. So inflation will sort itself out. However, we have a bigger problem. with the fact that the economy is contracting. And you could see the heap of liquidity that has been, sterilized by the cash reserve requirement. You could see the height that the monetary policy rate is. You need to ease both the rate and the quantity. You need to let that liquidity blocked up in cash reserve requirement find its way back to support the weakening economy in an orderly manner.
Okay, let's look at low productivity. I mean, this economy is, productivity is hardly where you expect it to be. How can that, be spiked so that it can actually have some impact, positive impact on, this inflation? Or how can we really achieve equilibrium?
Why do you think productivity is not?
I don't think that's what experts have been saying.
Well,
that productivity
it's
is
more
low.
in terms of low capacity utilization. I don't think it's about productivity. It's that the installed capacity isn't being utilized. It's more like saying you have unemployment, not of labor now, but of capital. That's even the investment you have made. If you were to look at the factory capacities installed, yes, in the auto sector, they are not using 10% of the installed capacity. So we are dealing with, underutilization of capacity. We are dealing with underemployment for labor as well, rather than issue of productivity.
But looking at the CBN's monetary policies and all of that, this government has been criticized over and over again as lacking in, a clear-cut fiscal policy. Now, with the CBN's monetary policies alone, can this, really change the situation?
Well,
without
I think
sound
it's
fiscal policies?
Well, I think it's more the absence of policy coordination. A case in which the government, the fiscal authorities are saying that they want to stimulate the economy.
Reflect the economy?
They want to reflate the economy. But you have a central bank that is tightening. That's a conflict, So they need to...
So they're not necessarily working in tandem?
Well, they were not working in tandem, but I do think that now they have no choice but to work in tandem.
And well,
to
even think of it that
to agree
the CBN,
on a common objective.
Yeah, the CBN has a mandate to be, apart from being the banker to the federal government, also an advisor to the federal government when it comes to some of these issues. So
Yes.
it's surprising that they were not working in tandem. But let's bring in our Abuja guests now to weigh in on the issue of productivity and underutilization. But Mr. Aliyu, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, productivity and underutilization, according to Mr. Ayo Teriba here. What effect it has on the Nigerian economy?
Well, first of all, there is the productivity in the Nigerian economy right now is low, obviously because of the current economic situation. And I do not think the central bank is putting enough policies to reflate the economy, as the honorable gentleman said. Now, what the government needs to do, in order to increase productivity in the economy, you need to encourage, you need to put money in the hands of people. People need to be able to go out there and buy things, and that is the only way to increase productivity, hence increase employment. Now, the government came out with policies of since the budget has been passed, they were going to release about 350 billion into the economy. That they said they were going to do, they haven't done that. This again is going to hold up expenditure in the economy. They also talked about, they are going to release 500 billion naira to give 5,000 naira to the dependable and all that. These are policies the government needs to do to increase productivity. Now, they've talked about policies they are going to do, but nobody has seen these policies. As such, the economy is still stagnant. So these are things the government should do through the central bank. The central bank should look for every means possible to reduce the interest rate, because if you reduce the interest rates, that will help people to go, businessmen will be able to go to the bank and take money and do businesses. This will also lead to increase in productivity. So these are the policies the central banks need to adopt. These are the policies the government needs to adopt. They should work, their monetary policy committee, I'm a critic of it because what they should be working is to reduce interest rate in this country to single digit like in most countries. So these are things we are not doing. And we cannot fool ourselves and tell ourselves that we're developed. We're not. I mean, we need to be aggressive and target these policies, and these are the only policies that will lead into productivity, lead into increased employment, and reduce inflation.
Yeah, talking about single digits of inflation, the West African Monetary Zone, and I know you've been in the circle of, for years, you know, I've had a cause to see you more than 15 years now in the world of economics in Nigeria, and I'm sure you're aware of the WAMI and the WAM zone and everything going on, and they've been trying to achieve single digit for years. Do you think that will happen anytime soon?
Well, you have to be a bit careful that it's the inflation is about the nations making up these regions, making up this. And for Nigeria, we did achieve single digit inflation in the last couple of years. It's only recently that we came back into double digits. I mean, last year
What were we doing right then?
Well, it's not about what we were doing. The fact that you have inflation for brief moments does not mean that you did something wrong.
Okay.
Cost shocks, there's very little you can do about them. You can't prevent them, you can't kill them. When cost shocks happen, recognize them for what they are.
Okay, you
move on. So we are back to double digits, not because we did anything wrong, but because of global shocks that created the foreign exchange crisis that led us into this devaluation and the pump prices adjustment.
But don't you think it's because we were overexposed and too vulnerable with our monoproduct economy? Imagine if alongside the oil, Nigeria focused on other areas that it's planning to diversify now. Look, the solid minerals, agriculture, and all of that. I mean, wouldn't this have actually put Nigeria in a good place? That
it would not have
commodities prices would not really matter.
There is no African country that is not grappling with the exchange rate shock, and the debate about
but largely because we remain a
we're
all consumer societies.
It's happening in all petroleum exporting countries.
I want to make my argument.
A shock is a shock. Things were very well under control, up till about 6 months or so ago. But the shocks that we are responding to is that sharp drop in the price of crude. Even if we had a diversified economy, that shock would still have hit us. I'm not saying that it's not that we shouldn't diversify, but I'm saying that it's not. We shouldn't embark on the blame game. You have a shock, recognize how it has hurt you, and look for the best ways.
It's not even about blaming anybody or any situation.
Yes.
What we're saying here is, if Nigeria had still, maintained its agricultural, angle, if I could put it that way. If we're still an agricultural nation, solid minerals was doing well,
of course,
and all of those areas.
Of course, we remain an agricultural nation.
The impact would not be as bad as we have felt it now, with oil only a source of income.
Well, oil the main source of export income. Yeah, it would have been better off, if you had it diversified.
Perhaps, that's okay.
And it's based.
Okay, let's look at, as bizarre as it may sound, some economists would say when you have inflation like this, some sectors, some part of the economy make gains. And some have said perhaps maybe not cost shock inflation, but that, for instance, the federal government bond, which has a fixed rate, the cost of your buying things is high, but the fixed rate is there. Would that in any way make the government smile?
Right. The key point about the inflation that we must keep in mind is that it's not about inflation in 1 month in the year. It's not about inflation in 2 months in the year. Excuse me. February has been a bad month. May has turned out to be an even worse month because February, month on month was 2.2%. May, month on month, became 2.8%. Other months may turn out better. As a matter of fact, with the improvement in the parallel market exchange rate,
Right.
you could have some months turning in at negative inflation rate before the year ends. So what matters for welfare effects or redistribution of income is the average for the year.
Okay.
It's not, you could have a very high month, you could have a very low month. So it's not those outliers that will define the distributional effects.
When our guest in Abuja, Audu, talked about interest rate reduction, you were,
I'm in agreement.
You were in
very
agreement.
strongly
Yes.
in agreement. In that, I do think that the error of the past among the policy making process is that we ignored the real economy and started chasing inflation, short-term inflation.
Perhaps let's look at the equity holders or investors. This shock, what effect do you think this shock will have on equity investment holders?
Well, you just noted the improvement in the market following the announcement. I do think that the new policy, it's more about the response of the central bank to the shock. It's like to have beneficial effect on the economy. If you look at the response of the autonomous rate, the parallel market rate already, is firming up. You looked at the market growth in response. So I believe that the shock that contracted the market is now being responded to, and you should expect improvements, in the market.
How soon?
Of course, you had some immediate response. She was saying how many? You said 900.
About 700 billion.
700 billion. So, and she was asking for sustenance already.
Okay.
So the good
you had
signs
some
are there.
positive effects.
Okay,
and if
so-
you also look at the parallel market exchange rate, it's firmed up over the week. It has sustained.
All right, as usual, we try to, bring you better perspectives. So let's understand what drives inflation and why Nigeria's inflation rate, continues to spike. In spite of the fact that our guest in the studio thinks there is no cause for alarm. But what the figures are saying may just put some doubt in the minds of people. Now, Nigeria's inflation rate now stands at 15.6% for the month of May, like you already heard. 1.9% higher than 13.7% recorded in the month of April. Now, it is the highest figure recorded in more than 6 years as the cost of food items, housing, utilities and transport surged, mostly due to this drastic change. All right, so Nigeria's inflation rate averaged 12.13% from 1996 until February 2016 on a monthly basis. Consumer prices went up 2.75%. And the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS, from now on, which released the new report, says all the divisions it uses in calculating the rate witnessed increases in the period under review. Now, this is the fourth consecutive month the rate or CPI would be increasing. In January, it was 9.6%, 11.4% in February, 12.8% in March, and 13.7% in April. Okay, so in Nigeria, the Consumer Price Index, that's the CPI, measures the change over time in prices of 740 goods and services, which means you look at what the price is with this 740 goods and services in determining, the rate of inflation. Now, the index weights are based on expenditures of both urban and rural households in all 36 states. Now, these are the classes of commodities the Statistics Bureau uses in calculating the CPI. Okay, now, so food and non-alcoholic beverages, clothing and footwear, housing and water, electricity, gas, transport, all of this determine. So let's look at this in simple terms. In April, the average price of a bag of rice was 13,000 naira to 14,000 naira. Now, it now sells for 15,000 naira, between 15 and 16,000 naira, and it is likely to actually increase. Now, a tin of gari, which used to sell for 500 naira, now sells, actually used to be 300 naira, it now sells for between 350 and 400 naira. Would that be the measurement used called, is it mudu or what is it now? Or is it the paint?
Or the Congo.
A tin or Congo. Okay. Now, tomato is now perhaps the most expensive food item in the market. If you didn't know that, I wonder where you are on the face of the planet. Now, the scarcity of the commodity caused by Tuta absoluta, also known as tomato Ebola, has made the price of tomato shoot up. 3 seeds of tomato now sells for 200 naira and above. Now, tomato that sold for 200 naira some months back now sells for 1,000 naira. And I can confirm that to you because I bought tomatoes just the other day, Busolami, 1,000 naira for just 8.
I don't even know what tomato looks
You don't
like
know what
these
tomato
days.
looks like anymore.
It's
Okay,
too
there you go.
expensive.
So a tuber of yam that was 400 naira is now sold for between 700 and 800 naira. Electricity tariff has also increased this year with an average additional cost of 9 naira per kilowatt hour of power since a 45% increase in February. Okay, let's see if that's going to move. Additional upward measure came from clothing and footwear, 12.7% from 12%.
Don't forget that most of those items are imported. The footwear, the clothing are imported, and of course, so if you get your exchange rate at the parallel market, it's going to reflect on the cost of those goods in the
And
market.
that's exactly what's happening
Yeah.
right now. I mean, shoes that would, go for about 7 to 10,000 naira now go for like 15
Indeed.
or 18. Okay. All right, so transportation has also risen by 14% from 13.2%. Furnishings and household equipment, 9.6% from 9.1%. Still moving on now. So here we are with an inflation rate of 15.9%. Mr. Tariba, or maybe I should throw this question at our guest in Abuja there, Mr. Audu. Like I asked you earlier, what exactly is the way out? I mean, we've been talking about import substitution, diversifying the economy, patronizing made in Nigeria. In the short term to medium term, what are those things you think we need to put in place to absorb some of these shocks? While they're trying to sort him out, Mr. Tariba, right here in the studio,
Yes.
You heard my question.
Yeah.
Medium, short term, what solutions are there?
Well, the inflation you are talking about happened last month. Okay?
Yes.
So it's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it. You've been hit.
So going forward.
So what matters for policy is the future. And the likelihood is that you will deal with a lower level of inflation going forward. So there is nothing you can do to a bullet that already hit you, apart from going to treat the wound. Now, for diversification of the economy or buy made in Nigeria, you have to be careful. You can only buy what Nigeria can produce. Nigeria's problem is not that anything that is produced cannot be sold. There's nothing that Nigeria has produced that is not being bought. So launching a Buy Nigeria campaign is a waste of time. Okay. Nigeria's problem is the ability to produce the goods in the first place. And there you come face to face with the fact that it's not about pushing agriculture or pushing manufacturing. It's about addressing the reason why agriculture is not doing as well, why more than half of the harvest rot in the farm. Fix energy supply. Whether you are talking of electricity, or you are talking of gas, or you are talking of petrol. As long as you don't fix those three and you say buy Nigeria, it's self-deceit. If you fix those three, agriculture will be competitive spontaneously.
Okay.
Manufacturing will be competitive. So fix what's wrong with the Nigerian economy. And energy is one category. Transportation is the second category. Fix those, and I think you will get the diversified economy faster than you could imagine.
Mr. Tariba, but these are long-term, policies.
You always say so.
Yeah, in the
you
short
always
term,
say
what
so.
I'm
The
trying to
journey
find
of
out
1,000 miles
starts with
one step.
So
the future begins today. Because
Indeed.
we'll never fix them if you say long
I really like your optimism.
Indeed.
Really,
So,
Mr.
Mr. Audu, are you on the same page with Mr. Tariba? He feels that, the campaign to buy Nigeria, patronize Nigeria may not necessarily solve the problem. The problem really is our ability to actually produce.
If you have an injured
Yes,
player,
I want
you're
Mr.
better
Audu
off
to
fixing
answer that.
injury and forgetting about bringing it into the pitch.
Aliyu Audu, if you heard my question.
Okay, well, just Mr. Audu probably will try and reconnect with you, but Mr. Ayo, I said I like your optimism, really, and you remember the projection for this year, the GDP, and what we now have today, quite a lot of optimism going on there. But I hope we can hold you to this 2-3 months down the line. Hopefully, that this shock you talked about will find its level and things will settle down. But let's quickly look at the palliative measures of the Nigerian government in what we have today, the purchasing power of the Nigerian populace and these palliative measures. Do you think it will in any way cushion some effect, just have some comforting effect on the people?
Oh yes, you have an economy that's in decline already, and if people get the money to spend, it's likely to stimulate the economy. I do think that it's been tackled from many. You hear the states are receiving support. Some call it bailout, to help them face the situation in which some of them have not been able to pay salaries for 2 months, 3 months, or even more. So if you combine increased payment of salaries to government workers with the palliatives that government has announced and that they are now embarking upon, it should play a small role in stimulating the economy.
A small role.
Very small role. Mind you, 500 billion naira in Nigerian economy. Nigerian economy is currently 100 trillion large. So you are talking of these palliatives
It's
is
almost
just half a
less than a
percentage
drop
point.
in the ocean.
So don't lean too much weight on it. You still have to stimulate growth, rather than redistributing half a percentage point of the economy and hoping that that's going to make all the difference.
Okay, let's throw the same question to Mr. Audu. If you can hear us, these palliatives, do you agree with Mr. Tariba here in the studio that it's almost like a drop in the ocean? How much impact do you think this will make or not?
Well, first of all, I think the government has to start from somewhere, and with the palliative they've promised, I think they should start it. Because if you look at other countries like Brazil, this is the same thing they are doing to the unprivileged, the people that do not have. Such palliatives help to stimulate the economy, so I think it's a step in the right direction. Now, the long-term solution to it is diversification, as you talked about earlier on. The government has to diversify from oil into agriculture, manufacturing, and solid minerals. Currently, the budget did not make enough provision for agriculture. We have a very big land for agriculture in Nigeria, and the government has to put in a lot of money. I think rather than budgeting 29 billion, if the government was serious, they should budget about 1 trillion to be invested in agriculture. This is the only way we can create a long-term solution to resolving the issue, production problems, and over-dependency on importation in Nigeria. So the government has to do that. And such policies will, in the long term, lead to us being able to, be dependent on ourselves, rely on our own products rather than importation. We are importing rice now. That should not be so. We should not be importing rice. Now, over-dependency on oil is killing us, because if there's oil shock, this leads to inflation, foreign exchange problems. That is what we are having. And if the government knows this, this is, you know, we should now start investing in other sectors, solid minerals, manufacturing, and agriculture. In the current budget, there is nothing made for manufacturing. There's no provision for manufacturing.
Well, you're aware that the budget itself, it's been run at a deficit. The first quarter has recorded about 725 billion naira deficit. As we speak, you're aware?
I didn't get that, sorry.
We're talking about deficit now. You said the government should have allocated 1 trillion naira to agriculture and another amount that you're about to mention on manufacturing. I say you're aware that the budget itself is run, it's a budget of deficit. As at the first quarter of this year, about 725 billion naira deficit has been recorded. You're aware of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what I'm now saying is that you know, there are a lot of programs being taken by the government. Money recovered from corruption, money recovered from here and there. This money should be invested in agriculture. It should be invested in manufacturing. It should be invested in solid minerals. You know, they have gone about, you know, intensified pressure on collecting internal revenue, IGR. Now, this is where the focus should be. Rather than giving bailout to states, and we don't see any point of it, because if you give bailout to states, you know, nothing is coming out of it. These monies and subsequent monies from corruption recovered from various places should be targeted towards agriculture and manufacturing. That is the way I look at it. You know, we need to know our priority. What is our priority? We are already experiencing foreign exchange crisis. We are already experiencing cost push inflation because of increase in fuel, and this cost push inflation is going to stay as long as oil prices, the cost of petrol remains high. So it's extremely important. The government has to understand what is our priority. Okay. Our priority is to feed the nation, to become self-sufficient, to increase production, increase employment. And the way to do that is to invest in manufacturing, agriculture, and solid minerals.
Yes, points very well taken, Mr. Audu, there in Abuja. Let me throw the last question to you.
He actually grunted when Mr.
Yes, when he talked about 1 trillion.
1 trillion naira.
Yes. Do you think that's too much? I mean, 1 trillion out of the 6.06 trillion naira budget?
Careful in discussing government budget. There is government business and there's private business. There are sectors that only the government can play, you know, in a sense, and it comes down entirely to government budget. For example, defense, okay? There are sectors where the private sector dominates. Government play supportive roles. For example, manufacturing, even agriculture, you know, so what happens in agriculture is more the result of what private sector does than what government does. Government is playing supportive roles, you know, supporting farmers, you know, supplying inputs and that.
So
it's not that it is the government that is doing the agriculture. Okay. It's crops, for example, is the second largest sector of the economy. It's that big, not because of government budget, but because of private investment. So I do think, you know, we have to be careful. Where government would benefit all sectors is to ensure that infrastructure works. If infrastructure works, it leads to reduced costs for everybody, and that's competitiveness. You know, rather than saying that they should chase those sectors now, because if you chase those sectors and they're killed by absence of fuel or absence of gas or absence of electricity,
okay,
to preserve post-harvest.
Okay, so that's where we have to say thank you very much, gentlemen. Ayo Teriba and Aliyu Audu joined us from Abuja there, talking Nigeria's present 15.6% inflation rate.
In the month of May.
In the month of May. We'll have you for the month of June and July.
Thank you so much.
And probably August. All right? Thank you for coming.
Thanks.